Woodvail had been dying for as long as I could remember. The hardware store went under 2 winters ago, and half the storefronts downtown were faded, hollow, papered over with peeling notices no one read. The only steady lights came from the feed store, the post office, and that flickering gas station where bored teenagers hung around with nothing better to do. It was a place slowly sinking into its own quiet oblivion. I stayed, not because I wanted to, because I had to. My 2 girls needed their friends at school. Rosie needed something close to normal, and someone had to keep the mortgage paid on the house Karen, my ex-wife, once painted sky blue. I stayed, not because I wanted to, because I had to. And for a while I thought maybe we were finally moving forward. Then death came to Woodvail, and everything I thought I knew unraveled the night I realized the thing haunting us was something I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares. Karen and I had married young, too young maybe, but there was a kind of chemistry between us that never really went out, not even in the worst years. She was wild when we met, smart, impulsive, stubborn in the way that made you want to follow her off a cliff. We had fights, sure, but there was love there. A deep, strange kind of love that sometimes made no sense to anyone else. She poured her heart and soul into our family and this house. She wanted to raise the girls in a place that felt like it came from a dream. Then 5 years ago, everything changed, fast. From one day to the next, Karen started pulling away. She became someone else almost overnight. Cold, standoffish, always looking past me like she was already somewhere else. She said she was bored, said she felt trapped, that she wanted more. I couldn't reach her. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Every word, every silence, just another nail in the coffin of what we had. Over 2 months, everything fell apart. She stopped cooking, stopped sleeping in our bed. We barely spoke, only fought. The girls noticed, suffered, and didn't understand. Then one night, she sat me down. Calm as anything, she told me she'd met someone online and was going to visit him for the weekend. Just like that. She showed me his profile, some shaved-head wannabe biker, shirtless with a cigarette in his mouth, and a face that screamed trouble. She wanted me to see it, wanted it to sting. She left the next morning with a small bag and didn't look back. We tried calling after that. Of course, I called her phone so many times the number eventually disconnected. There was no forwarding address, no trace. She vanished into thin air. Because we couldn't find her, there was no messy divorce, no custody battle, just a long, hollow absence. After a year, I filed for abandonment and finalized the divorce myself. It felt less like closure and more like closing the lid on a coffin no one ever found. I was 43. I taught history at the high school, which was probably the only reason I managed to keep it together through the worst of it. It gave me structure, a paycheck, and a reason to get out of bed when the silence in the house got too loud. Without it, I don't know what I would have done, especially raising 2 daughters on my own. Leah was 16, all hard edges and cold silences. Rosie, 11, still talked about her mom like she'd come back any day. She left notes under her pillow at night. Come home soon. After 5 years, I thought we were starting to find a rhythm. Not happiness exactly, but something that passed for peace. Then something started haunting the town, and everything changed. The motion light out back started going off every night, always around the same hour, sometime after midnight. At first I chalked it up to wind, maybe small animals scurrying through the yard. Sometimes a fox would nose around near the shed and trip it. But this was different. Every time I went to look, the yard was deathly still. No rustling, no footprints in the frost. Just silence, and like whatever had been there was already gone, or never quite real to begin with. It happened again the next night, then again. Same hour, same eerie stillness afterward. I started waiting for it, watching from the window with the lights off. Nothing ever showed itself, but I could feel it, like being watched from the trees, like something was pacing just beyond the reach of the motion light. It wasn't random, it was a routine. Then I found the fence. 4 long claw marks carved deep into the wood. Not scratches, gouges, each one sunk into the grain like a blade. Too high off the ground for a dog, too deliberate for any wild animal. They weren't random. They were a message, a warning, or maybe a claim. The trash bin had been dragged halfway across the yard, lid wrenched clean off, contents spilled in a warped crescent pattern that almost looked ritualistic. Not just rummaged, examined, like someone had taken their time. Bones, some cracked open for marrow, wrappers, greasy paper, crumpled receipts. A few nights later, I stepped out in the morning and found a horrible sight on the street, right next to my car. A half-eaten rabbit. Its hind legs had been gnawed to the bone, spine twisted in blind rage, the fur soaked through with what smelled like urine. A horrific sight and a clear sign that there was some kind of predator in the area. I stood there staring at it for a long time, the cold seeping through my socks, the silence pressing in. Something had chosen this area as its territory, and our house was in it. But it wasn't just us. The whole town started shifting under the weight of something nobody wanted to name. At first, it was just unease, animals going missing, fences torn down, howls in the distance that didn't match any coyote or dog. Then things got worse. A calf was found torn apart out by the Carter farm, eviscerated so violently the ranch hand who found it quit on the spot. They said parts of the carcass were strung across the fence like garland. The night after, the Hendersons' golden retriever vanished and was found 2 days later, laid out in the woods behind our backyard. Well, at least what was left of it. At the feed store, people kept their voices low, their eyes watchful. An old hunter named Dunlap said he'd seen something in the woods. He wasn't the superstitious type. He said it walked upright sometimes, said it breathed heavy, said it watched him from the trees for a full minute before disappearing into the underbrush without a sound. Didn't walk like a bear, he muttered, nursing his coffee like a man who wished he could forget. There was a tightness in everyone's voice, like something was pressing down on the town's chest. Something old, something angry. I started keeping the shotgun close by and loaded. Rosie handed me a drawing one morning, serious as could be. She used charcoal and red marker. It showed something hunched, with long arms that dragged the ground, black fur and dark hollows where the eyes should be. She didn't speak much, just slid the paper across the table like it was a school assignment. But her face, though, it held something more. Not fear, excitement. "It watches the house," she said. "It's protecting us." I stared at the picture a long time. Rosie must have seen that thing from her window in her room, upstairs. The details were too sharp, too close to what I'd imagined, too real. And now she'd drawn it. I couldn't just ignore this. It wasn't some doodle. It was a message, a connection. I started to worry. Not just about the thing outside, but about Rosie. She'd never fully accepted that Karen was gone. She still talked to her at night, whispered to her pillow, set aside pieces of toast at breakfast like it was some kind of offering. And now this creature, this drawing, it was like she was projecting Karen onto it, willing her mother back into the world in whatever shape she could. That thing was a dangerous predator, and I had to keep Rosie away from it at all costs. There was something heartbreaking about it. She needed a mother so badly, she was starting to build one from nightmares. A shadow, given form by love, grief, and imagination. I couldn't shake the feeling that the more this thing lingered, the more it became real to her. And if she saw it enough, believed in it deeply enough, she might just try to reach out and touch it. And the worst part? The thing, the whatever it was, hadn't yet come right up to the house, but it was getting bolder. I'd found paw prints in the front yard twice now, deep impressions the size of dinner plates, spaced too far apart for a normal animal. And the way they came and went, always looping around the property, as if drawing a circle, told me whatever it was wasn't just passing through. It was circling, studying. It knew where we were and it was starting to observe us. That pattern, that deliberate repetition, chilled me more than the noise and even the rabbit. By now, it had taken several animals in the neighborhood. Everyone knew about it, talked about, kept their loved ones close. First livestock, then pets. A neighbor's goat vanished, then a leg turned up in the gutter in front of the house. Someone else's cat ended up in the same ditch, just 30 feet down the road. It all happened within about 300 feet of our house. There was no denying it. I knew it was only a matter of time before it tested the boundaries. And each time Rosie spoke about it, each time she drew it, or talked to it like it was welcome, I felt a cold dread settle deeper in my bones. And Rosie, she wasn't just aware of it, she was connecting to it, like she actually wanted it to come closer. She'd glance out the window at the exact moment the motion light flared. She'd sit at the breakfast table in silence on mornings after a close encounter, staring at her plate like something had visited her dreams. I caught her once standing barefoot in the hallway, in the middle of the night, just looking out the back door, like she was waiting for something. Leah just rolled her eyes when I showed her the drawing. "It's just a drawing, don't freak her out." But Rosie wasn't scared. She didn't even look worried. There was something almost dreamy in the way she spoke, like she'd been thinking about it for a long time. "I think it's trying to come inside," she said, her voice soft and even. That sentence stuck with me. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, like she actually wanted it to come in. The way she said it, calm, almost hopeful, chilled me more than anything else. That simple sentence rang in my ears for the rest of the day. I couldn't shake the image. Rosie quietly unlocking the back door one night, stepping barefoot onto the porch in her pajamas, walking toward that thing thinking it was her mother. And what would it do then? Probably tear her open like the rabbit and drag her into the woods. I couldn't bear the thought of losing Rosie. That was what scared me the most. This thing had become her mother in her mind. A surrogate, a projection, a phantom she wanted so badly to exist she'd let anything wear that face. I started leaving every light on I could afford to keep running. Kept the shotgun close, even when the kids were around. Slept in my chair in the living room most nights, strategically positioned so I could see both the front and back door. It was Leah who forgot to lock the back door that night. I didn't blame her. We were all tired, worn down by the little things. Dishes sat in the sink. The car had broken down again earlier. I was half asleep in my chair when Leah screamed. I didn't even have time to think. I bolted into the hallway, shotgun already in my hands, still in my undershirt and bare feet, heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. And there it was. It was on all fours at first, low to the ground, its limbs bent and uneven like it had forgotten how to move like anything else. The arms were longer than the legs, jointed strangely, knuckling the floor as it shifted forward with slow, cautious movements. The muscles beneath its matted fur twitched and flexed with unnatural rhythm. The smell hit me like a punch. Wet fur, rot, copper, and something sour. Leah stood frozen in the hallway, caught in its line of sight. Then, with a wet, cracking sound that turned my stomach, it began to lift itself up. Not smoothly, laboriously. Each joint moved like it had to remember what upright meant. It rose onto two legs with visible strain, its spine curved, shoulders hunched, arms still dangling long enough to nearly brush the floor. It swayed for a second, finding its balance, and just stood there, hulking, broken, watching. For one breathless second, I thought it was going to leap. The way it stood there, hulking, swaying, arms nearly dragging the floor, it looked more like something out of a nightmare than a living creature. My stomach turned. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. This wasn't an animal. It wasn't human. It was some horrific thing in between, trembling and alive and staring straight at me and my daughter. I began to raise the shotgun, hands trembling but locked in place, determined to end this hellish creature right then and there. I could feel my finger tense against the trigger. Whatever it was, I wasn't going to let it hurt my girls. And that's when Rosie appeared. She stepped silently into the hallway behind the beast, her small form framed by the glow of the living room light. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open, not in fear but wonder, like she was looking at something sacred, something long lost. My heart stuttered. I didn't pull the trigger, because if I'd pulled it in that moment of instinct and fear, I would have hit Rosie. She was right behind the thing. Just a few feet further, and the shot would have torn through both of them. The realization dropped into my chest like ice water. My hands started to shake, the weight of the shotgun suddenly unbearable. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. All I could do was stare as the moment passed me by, and the impossible creature turned its head to look at Rosie. It looked down at her. It didn't growl. It didn't lunge. It just stood there, swaying faintly, its breath rasping in its chest, head tilted ever so slightly like it was trying to comprehend. Rosie didn't move. She didn't scream. She just looked up at it, lips parted slightly, her tiny hands at her sides. I moved before I had a plan. I started yelling. At the creature. At Rosie. At the whole surreal nightmare unraveling in front of me. My voice came out hoarse and sharp, cutting through the heavy silence of the hallway. "Get away from it! Rosie, move!" I shouted, stepping forward fast, trying to draw the thing's attention away from her. The beast flinched at the sound, its head whipping toward me with a sudden, jerking motion. I could see its nostrils flare, its muscles tense. My shotgun was still raised, my body screaming at me to fire. "Get back, Rosie!" I yelled again, more desperate this time. She didn't move. She just stood there, her little face glowing in the dim light, staring up at the creature like it was something holy. It looked at me, really looked at me. Then it growled, deep and guttural, a low, vibrating rumble that made my skin crawl. Its lips peeled back slowly, bearing massive, uneven canines that glistened in the dim hallway light. The sound was a warning. I braced myself, my finger tensed on the trigger again. But the thing didn't lunge. Instead, it turned away, slowly, its impossible form sagging like it was exhausted. It dragged one arm behind as it began to shuffle toward the back door. Rosie, still standing frozen near the wall, gasped as the thing moved toward her. For a moment, I thought she was going to reach out and touch it. But at the last second, as the beast passed close enough to brush her shoulder, she stepped aside. The creature let out a low growl, more like a dog than a monster. Its breath came in short, hard pants. Then, finally, it dragged its hulking body out the open door. I followed slowly, every muscle in my body tense, the shotgun still raised in case it turned back. It didn't. It moved with deliberate effort, each step a drag like it was pulling the weight of 100 lifetimes. Its back was to me, but I kept the barrel trained on its warped spine, finger hovering just off the trigger. As soon as it cleared the threshold, I lunged forward and slammed the door shut with both hands, heart hammering in my ears. I twisted the lock and shoved the deadbolt in place so fast I nearly broke my finger. Then I stood there, palm flat against the wood, holding my breath. But even as I locked it, sealed it as best as I could, I knew it wouldn't matter. That thing was too big, too strong. If it wanted in, it would come in. That door would splinter in seconds under its weight. It hadn't stayed out because of locks or latches. I locked every door in the house that night, sat in the kitchen until dawn with the shotgun across my lap, staring at the floor, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. My mind kept replaying the way it had stood upright, swaying on two legs like a drunk or a dying thing, arms dragging like they didn't really fit the creature. The more I thought about it, the more a single word started forming in my mind. Werewolf. Not the kind you see in movies, not noble or majestic. It didn't shimmer in the light. It didn't howl at the sky. No snarling anti-hero wrapped in leather or Hollywood romance. It was a broken, sick-looking creature that growled, limped, and stank of blood and urine and rot. A thing that shouldn't be, and yet somehow was. And it was a predator. That much was certain. But why hadn't it attacked? Could it be smart enough to recognize my weapon? A terrifying thought. The morning after the creature left my house, I called Mike, the sheriff. I didn't hesitate. My hands were still shaking when I dialed his number, but I got the words out. "You need to come over." He didn't ask questions, just said he was on his way. When he arrived, he didn't waste time. He walked the perimeter of the house twice, slowly, gun resting loosely in one hand. He inspected the back door where the thing had exited, took photos of the enormous prints in the mud just outside, crouched low, squinting, quiet. He didn't say much at first, just grunted occasionally like he was trying to convince himself of something. He cataloged the prints with his phone, and held his boot next to them for scale. Then he looked at me. "That's no dog or wolf," was all he said. But even with the evidence, even with the claw marks and trampled grass and tracks looping around the house, there wasn't much he could do. No proof, no body, no break-in, just my word and his growing suspicion. He logged the prints in his notebook and left with a promise to keep an ear out. I think he knew this wasn't over. So did I. In the days after that thing stood in my hallway, I barely functioned. I went through the motions at school, grading papers with my mind 1,000 miles away, forcing smiles in the break room, while replaying every second of that night in my head. I barely slept. My shotgun stayed with me at all times. I watched the back door until sunrise more nights than not. 4 days after the incident at my house, a hiker went missing. A young woman from out of town. No one really knew her, just passing through. Her car was found abandoned at the Ridge Trail parking lot, the passenger door hanging open like she'd tried to rush back into the car. The police found a blood-soaked jacket about 50 yards off the path, not torn from a fall, shredded, ripped like something had mauled her. Her backpack had been ripped apart too, its contents scattered like someone had pawed through it with clawed hands. No one found a body, but there was enough evidence to make it clear she wasn't coming back. Of course, there were no witnesses, and no evidence pointing to any kind of animal, just the quiet aftermath of something brutal, something silent. For the first time, the beast had taken a person. A town hall meeting was called 2 days later at 3 in the afternoon, because no one was going out after dark anymore. The meeting wasn't scheduled, it just happened. People showed up, word got around. The community center filled fast, chairs dragged out in a hurry. Sheriff Mike stood at the front with a clipboard he barely looked at. I sat near the back, arms crossed, shotgun locked in my truck. Everyone was tense, angry, scared. Some wanted to form search parties. Others demanded to bring in outside help. One old man stood up and asked if the town was cursed. Mike did his best to calm them, but there wasn't much he could say. He didn't lie. He said the evidence didn't point to any known predator. He said they were investigating, that people should stay indoors at night, lock their doors, keep pets inside. It wasn't enough. Not really. And the whole time I just sat there knowing what I'd seen, what was still out there. Then I stood up. My boots echoed on the community center floor as I made my way to the front, past neighbors and co-workers, past faces that had smiled politely at me for years. Mike gave me a quick glance as I stepped beside him, but he didn't stop me. I turned to the crowd and told them what happened. I didn't use the word werewolf. I didn't talk about curses or myths or anything that would get me laughed out of the room. I just described what I'd seen, the height, the way it moved, how it rose up like it was broken inside, the stench, the black fur, the claws. I told them it came into my house, that it stood in my hallway, that it looked at my daughters, but didn't attack. I said it could have torn us all to pieces, but didn't. There was silence when I finished. A few people looked away, a few looked pale, and one or two, like Mike, looked like they already knew I was telling the truth. Then I said I wanted to help, that I was willing to volunteer if people were serious about forming a hunting party. I wasn't a soldier, but I knew how to shoot, and I had something the others didn't, a face-to-face encounter. I saw it, I said, and I'm telling you, we need to get off our butts and start working the problem. There was a long silence after I stepped away from the podium. No applause, no shouting, just a room full of people quietly recalibrating what they believed was possible. Mike stared at the floor for a second, jaw tight, then finally stepped forward. "All right," he said, his voice gravelly. "We'll organize something. Volunteers only. We'll go in tomorrow. First light." It wasn't exactly a rousing speech, but it was enough. The room stirred. Heads nodded. A few men, retired military, ex-hunters, even the school janitor, raised their hands to join. And just like that, the search became something real. We were going to hunt it. But Mike looked at me differently after that. Not with doubt anymore. With weight. Like he knew what this meant, and how little any of us were ready for it. There was a long silence after I stepped away from the podium. No applause, no shouting, just a room full of people quietly recalibrating what they believed was possible. Mike stared at the floor for a second, jaw tight, then finally stepped forward. "All right," he said, his voice gravelly. "We'll organize something. Volunteers only. We'll go in tomorrow, first light." It wasn't exactly a rousing speech, but it was enough. The room stirred, heads nodded. A few men, retired military, ex-hunters, even the school janitor, raised their hands to join, and just like that, the search became something real. We were going to hunt it. But Mike looked at me differently after that, not with doubt anymore, with weight, like he knew what this meant, and how little any of us were ready for it. The forest closed in around us as we pushed deeper past the ridge trail. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. Not peaceful, but heavy, like the woods were holding their breath. Our boots snapped through frost-covered underbrush, rifles slung low but ready. I found myself glancing over my shoulder more often than I liked. June took the lead, her sharp eyes combing the ground. She didn't talk much, just held up a hand now and then to point something out. A scuffed print near a patch of damp soil, a long scratch on the side of a tree trunk, a strange streak of fur caught in the bark. She moved like she belonged out there, boots steady, breathing calm. It was eerie how natural she seemed. "This way," she murmured, brushing aside a thicket with the barrel of her rifle. Something big passed through, dragging something, maybe. Mike and I exchanged a glance. Neither of us said what we were thinking. Every sign pointed toward something large, something strong, something purposeful. We kept walking. The air grew colder, the frost thicker. I couldn't help but notice the silence again. Not a single bird out there. And then, just beyond a moss-covered log, we found a half-frozen patch of churned-up ground, clawed deep, and a streak of blood arcing across the dirt. June knelt beside it and pressed 2 fingers into the soil. "This was days ago. Could still be close," she said quietly. We followed the trail eastward another half-mile, weaving between old trees and half-collapsed deer blinds until the ground began to rise. Then June stopped and pointed ahead with the barrel of her rifle. Through the bare branches and dense underbrush, I could just make out the weathered iron skeleton of the old railway line, forgotten and rust-stained, swallowed by time and trees. Mike stepped up beside her, squinting. "There's an old derailed train down this way," he said. "Been there since before I was born. Half of it's buried in the ravine. Kids used to dare each other to climb inside the cars back in the 80s. June knelt beside a patch of muddy earth along the railway embankment, her eyes narrowing. "Look at these," she muttered. We gathered around her. There were prints, dozens of them, some clearer than others, huge, deep, unnaturally shaped. They followed the old railway line, pressed into the soft, half-frozen ground with unsettling clarity. At a glance, they almost looked human, but the toes were too long, the pads were too wide, and each one ended in a vicious crescent groove, claws. Mike let out a low breath. The man from the silos took a step back, visibly pale. June touched one with her gloved hand and looked up at us. "I've seen prints like this once before," she said quietly. "Years ago, out near the old quarry. Nothing ever came of it. People said it was just a black bear with a limp, but I knew better then, and I know better now." None of us said a word, because we were all scared shitless. We followed the tracks along the overgrown rail line for another quarter-mile before the train came into view. The rusted-out husks of the cars emerged like shadows through the trees, a crumbling monument to something long forgotten. One boxcar lay half-buried in the slope of a ravine, its metal sides split open like a broken rib cage. The air changed the moment we stepped closer. It wasn't just the cold, it was the smell. It hit us like a wall. Rot. Blood, sweat, decay, the lair of a predator. We all raised our weapons instinctively. There were tracks everywhere around the boxcars, deep and tangled, some fresh, some half-frozen. We approached slowly, clearing one car at a time. Mike barked quiet instructions. 2 people swept the inside. 2 stood guard at all times. We moved like soldiers, though none of us were. The rusted steel groaned beneath our boots. Cold metal creaked in the wind. Every shadow looked like it might breathe. The smell became unbearable as we approached the fourth car. June opened the side door slowly, muzzle raised. I stood beside her. We saw it before she even said a word. There, hunched in the far corner of the car, was a large, dark silhouette. Its back was to us, but there was no mistaking it. Bent and hulking, matted with filth, its limbs shaking as it tore through something on the floor. I waved Mike over silently, heart thudding in my ears. He moved beside me, flicked on his flashlight, and the bright beam cut through the gloom. What we saw stopped us cold. The hiker. What was left of her, anyway. Her body was ruined, bones visible in several places. The beast was shoveling raw meat into its mouth with both hands. Definitely not an ordinary animal. Then it stopped. The flashlight had disturbed it. Its movements slowed, and its head twitched ever so slightly, sniffing the air. Then it turned around, slowly, reluctantly, ready to defend its meal. The flashlight beam caught its face first, smeared with blood, jaw slack and trembling. June let out a sharp gasp next to me, barely audible, but I felt the shock ripple through her. Her rifle didn't lower, but her hands shook slightly, the barrel swaying in midair. Mike stood stiffly at my other side, breath held, eyes fixed on the creature. "Jesus," he whispered. "What the hell is this?" Neither of them spoke louder than that. No one moved. There was no denying it now, and it had a face we'd never forget. Then I saw something I wasn't ready for. Illuminated by the beam, stretched across the beast's left shoulder beneath patches of matted fur and scar tissue, was a crescent moon tattoo. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Because there, in that flicker of light, I saw something that still haunts me to this day. This thing wasn't just some creature. The recognition hit me like a shovel to the head. My knees almost gave out. My stomach turned. There was no denying what I saw. Not the tattoo, not the weird shape of its jaw under the blood, not the way its eyes, somewhere in the mess of it all, flickered with a trace of something I once knew. I felt like I was floating outside my body, caught in a memory and a nightmare at the same time. This was the woman I'd married, the mother of my children, the person I'd divorced and cursed with every breath for 5 long years. Now here she was, feeding on human remains like an animal trapped in a form too cruel for nature. My brain clawed for an explanation, for something rational to latch onto. Maybe she'd been attacked, infected, changed by something I couldn't understand. Maybe she was sick, experimented on, lost in some government lab. Maybe this wasn't her at all, and my eyes were playing tricks on me. But none of those thoughts held up against the one cold, gut-deep certainty I couldn't shake. I knew her. I knew that body, that tattoo, that fractured sadness behind her eyes. And suddenly, everything else began to make sense. The way the creature had circled the house, the dead animals, the weird way it looked at us that night in the hallway. It hadn't been random. It hadn't been predatory instinct. It had been memory, familiarity. That's why it kept coming back. It wasn't just hunting. It was visiting home, bringing us its prey like a dog would with its favorite toys. I wanted to believe there was a reason, a cause, a path back. But all I saw was a horror wearing the memory of the woman I once loved, and the sick truth that somewhere, buried in that meat-stained frame, was still a piece of Karen. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drop the gun and run. I wanted it to not be real. But the smell, the heat, the wet sound of flesh in its mouth, her mouth, told me there wasn't. The spell shattered with a single thunderous crack. June's rifle. The blast echoed like cannon fire in the narrow metal boxcar. The beast jerked as the bullet tore into its torso, stumbling backward with a strangled, animalistic scream that shook the walls. But it didn't fall. Its eyes burned with rage and pain and something that looked too much like betrayal. Then it lunged, not at me, not at Mike, at June. She managed to fire a second shot, but it went wide, ricocheting off the wall. The creature slammed into her like a wrecking ball, sending them both backward out the side of the car and into the man who stood guard. They all hit the frozen ground with a sickening crunch, both rifles gone from their hands. The sound of the impact rang out like a car crash. June and the guard crumpled into the snow. The beast rolled once, then scrambled upright with an animal shriek that vibrated through my bones. Mike and I leapt from the car, weapons raised. "Karen!" I shouted without thinking. I don't know why I said it. Maybe out of desperation, maybe out of madness, but the thing stopped. It froze, trembling. Eyes locked on mine. Blood poured from the gunshot wound in its side, dripping into the snow in thick, steaming strands. It didn't look at Mike. It didn't look at June. Just me. "Karen?" I said again, stepping forward slowly. Its breath rattled. Its body sagged. For a moment I thought it might collapse, but then it growled low, more like a sob than a threat, and turned, staggering into the underbrush, vanishing into the cold. I turned to Mike, breathing hard. "Help them. Keep them safe." "What are you doing?" he asked, already crouching beside June. "I'm going after her." His head snapped up. "You're out of your mind." "Maybe," I said, "but I need to finish this." He looked like he wanted to argue, but he glanced at June, pale and moaning, and the man next to her, still unconscious in the snow. We both nodded to each other. My throat felt tight. I turned and slipped into the woods, shotgun steady, following the deep drag marks and the drops of steaming blood into the trees. The woods swallowed me quick. The further I followed the drag marks, the more the silence thickened, like the forest itself wanted to muffle what came next. The blood trail wove between frost-bitten trees, dark and steaming, and each step felt heavier than the last. I didn't call her name again. Not yet. I wasn't even sure what I'd say if I found her. Then I did. She was slumped against the side of a tree in a shallow clearing, one arm curled over her stomach, breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood soaked her fur. Her eyes met mine before I could even raise the shotgun. She didn't move. Neither did I. For a long, frozen moment, we just stood there. I saw the animal, the monstrous thing she'd become. But beneath it, I saw something else. Her. Karen. Or whatever was left of her. "I know it's you," I said softly. She twitched. A low whimper came from her throat. Not a growl, not a threat. Something almost mournful. I stepped closer. She didn't back away. I saw her shift, just slightly, as if struggling to rise. Her body trembled, too weak to stand again. Her face twisted, not in pain, but in something I couldn't name. Shame? Recognition? Grief? And then she lunged. I fired. The sound shattered the stillness. Her body collapsed mid-motion, folding in on itself with a sharp, final thud. She lay still. I stood there a long time, unable to move, shotgun still smoking. The silence returned slowly, cold and absolute. I stepped forward, knees weak, and knelt beside what was left of her. Her eyes were open, still, and in them, I swear, just before the last light faded, I saw her. Karen, my wife, and then she was gone. Before I left the clearing, I knelt beside her body one last time. I could hardly myself to touch her, but it had to be done. I took out the utility knife I always carried and, with a shaking hand, removed one of her clawed fingers. I didn't have anything with me to store it properly, so I just had to out it into my pocket for the moment. I needed answers. Maybe I just needed to convince myself this hadn't all been a hallucination. Whatever the reason, I couldn't let walk away without at least trying to find out what happened here. "Burn the body," I said to Mike. "Tonight. Don't let the town see it. Nothing good would come of it." He didn't ask why. He just nodded. On my way back to town, I made a quick stop at the school. The place was dark and empty, but I had a key to the science building. I slipped inside the biology lab, flicked on the dim emergency lights, and made my way to the back storage room. There, among shelves of dissection kits and preserved specimens, I found the industrial freezer they used for lab samples. I opened the door, placed the severed finger, now wrapped in a plastic produce bag from my glove box, into an old specimen jar, and set it inside. I logged it under a fake entry. No one would find it unless they knew exactly what to look for. Maybe someday I'd find someone willing and trustworthy enough to have it analyzed. Maybe it would tell me the truth. But first, it was safer frozen, hidden, and locked away from a world that wasn't ready to know. Later that night, after I dropped the girls off at home and told them I was fine, I sat on the back steps for a long time, staring out across the yard, into the dark, waiting, I guess. For what? I don't know. But the motion light didn't come on. Not that night. Not the next one. I knew the story we'd tell. Knew what Mike would put in the report. Knew how people would twist it and forget it. But I'd remember. Always. And I swore to myself right then and there that one day I'd found out how all this happened. How my wife ended up like this. There had to be a rational explanation.